What's going on? Welcome back to another Shimmering Skies video for Disney Lorcana. This time we're going to be taking a look at one of the two starter decks coming out with the set. Now if you're like me, the starter decks are a great way to get a feel for what some of the cards in the set are going to play like, especially when they are highly themed like the Emerald Steel deck that we're going to be taking a look at. Now out of the box, this is going to be the complete deck list that you are going to get. As you can see, there are a lot of one of and two ofs in the deck list, which is pretty standard for a Lorcana starter deck, meaning that this might not be the most optimized version of what this deck wants to do, but it gives us a general idea of the type of theming that we get to play with. So Emerald Steel for this starter deck, the theme is going to be getting damage onto your opponent's characters and hopefully leaving them on the field so that we can follow up and gain extra benefits from our cards by damaging things that have damage on them, making our cards cheaper because things have damage on them, etc. Now the first couple times that we played with this deck, there was one big glaring issue, and that is that there's no easy way to get damage on your opponent, especially if they are not willing to challenge back into your things, or if they're running a lot of low cost characters. We end up just taking them out before we're able to benefit from them having the damage on it. This starter deck is also very much character based, and the characters that were included don't have the deal 1 damage to something abilities. So in order to upgrade this, we're going to be looking to remove some of these one of inclusions and trying to keep the theme as closely as possible to what they were trying to do, but make it something that's much more enjoyable to play, so we can actually do the thing instead of how it works right now, which is you kind of just sit there and while you're trying to set up damage on the other side of the field, they're questing, they're getting taken out in one go by our guys, and then we kind of just never get to benefit from having the damage on the opposing characters. So now just looking at the cards that came with the starter deck, the main cards that are very core to how this deck works is the Scar, that is the foil rare that's featured on the box, as well as the foil Kronk on the front of the box. With Scar, whenever one of your characters challenges a opposing character that has damage on them, you get to draw a card. So he really works as our draw engine, and with having Ward, he's not in danger of getting taken out too easily. And then with Kronk, once we're able to get him onto the field, because he has a bigger body and can take things out, hopefully how it works is we're taking out an already damaged character, and then we get to draw a card, and with Kronk's ability, we then get to play a character 5 costs or less for free. So ideally, we want to include as many characters at 5 costs or less so that we can play them with Kronk. The only exception to that is going to be the Robin Hood Timely Contestant. I think Robin Hood is a secondary theme to this deck and something that you'll see in a second we're going to really improve on, because Robin Hood has access to some of the best single damage ping in the game, which makes a lot of sense with what this deck was going for. So the other cards of note to talk about that we are most likely keeping in this edit are going to be the Robin Hood Archery Contestant. Like I said, I think Robin Hood's a great secondary character in this deck, especially since we do have a shift Robin Hood in the 5 slot as well. We'll keep the Kronk just so we have a way to get our big Kronk out a little bit faster. Both of these will probably go up to 4 instead of the 3 that were included with the deck. Although I do really like the hyenas and how they play off each other, I was never able to consistently get them online to a place that felt very comfortable to use, so they might need to get trimmed from the deck as well. But we could definitely keep Pete Games Referee, because when we play him, you're going to be able to lock out your opponent from playing any actions or songs until your next turn, which is even more important because this deck also gives opposing characters Reckless, meaning they have to challenge or sing and they can't quest. And if we're preventing them from singing with actions, they'll have to quest. They'll have to challenge into us, which is kind of what we want to do in this deck. We'll also keep Simba Lost Prince just for the additional card draw. It's an alternative to Scar, and it's only when this Simba takes something out. We're also going to be using the Shift Simba to clear out items and locations, so might as well have Simba in the deck as well. Other than that, I do like this Yzma card. It is almost like Tinkerbell's secondary ability. When you take something out, for Yzma, you get to deal 1 damage to any character. Getting this out to just keep the supply of ping damage rolling, and getting your board state where you can just get an additional damage here and there to activate more of your abilities could be something that's really good. We'll probably bump this up to 4 copies as well. Since we're dealing so much damage and hopefully keeping the opposing characters on the board, We will be using 4 copies of the new Robin Hood Sneaky Sleuth, and for every damage character that our opponents have, he's going to get an extra lore, meaning he's going to be one of our big questers, hopefully later in the game when our opponent goes wide, and we take advantage of that by putting just 1 damage on everything to get a whole bunch of lore. I think that does it for the characters. Everything else, unfortunately, can be replaced with better versions of cards that we already have, like this Hey Hey Bodyguard. We do have a better bodyguard from the previous set that I'd like to include instead. Bodyguards are going to be very important in this deck because if we give one of the opposing characters Reckless, we want something with a lot of health on our side of the field for them to challenge into. That's going to survive the hit, but I think this Hey Hey is just a little bit too vulnerable to make me want to include it over a different card. All right, and now on to the actions that came with the starter deck. Food Fight is great for getting that initial engine up and running, and for 1 cost, it's really not too bad. You can play it on turn 3 or 4 and put that 1 ping damage so then afterwards you can start taking effect of your Scar. But unfortunately, you do need to pay another ink and exert your character in order to deal the 1 damage, and it's only for that 1 turn. So this could be a card that easily gets replaced down the road, but I think 2 or 3 copies is pretty safe to include for this version of the deck. Hypnotic Deduction is a great way to kind of filter out your hand and see what's coming next. It's also a very risky card. For example, when I was playing with it, I would draw 3 cards and then put 2 back based on the current board state, and then the board state changes, and now you know that the next 2 cards are not going to help with what's happening. But that might just be user error, and I may have put the wrong cards back. Maybe it is insightful to know what's coming to make different plays in preparation, but I'm not completely sold on this card. But being able to draw cards is always very good in Lorcana, so we'll keep it in maybe 2, maybe 3 copies. We'll see how many slots we have once we start stripping the other characters away. And then one of the most important cards in the deck actually is going to be Nighthowler Rage. I'll definitely be bumping this up to 4 copies. This card actually surprised me a lot. Allowing you to draw a card and giving an opposing character Reckless means that if we only exert 1 character, we're basically forcing their hand where they have to challenge into it, and that could set up something where now they only have 1 damage on it, or it can get them off the board completely. So I think this card has a lot of potential to set up some pretty spicy plays. I have a card in mind in particular that comboed with this would be very strong, so we'll see if we can fit that into the deck later. Tug of War, although a very useful card for dealing damage, I think it's too expensive at 5 cost. It is inkable, which means it could find its way into some decks, but 5 damage for basically a specialized version of Grab Your Sword that potentially won't even hit the entire board if your opponent's playing with mixed evasive and non-evasive characters is something we can just get rid of. And then the only song that they gave you in this deck was When Will My Life Begin from Tangled. Chosen character can't challenge during their next turn and draw a card. This card actually is pretty strong when your opposing characters have Reckless, meaning now they can't quest and they can't challenge, which could be used to stall out and allow our deck to take more advantage of it. You also get to draw a card with this for free if you sing it, which is pretty interesting. The first couple times I played with the deck, I definitely misused, but when you combo it with Reckless, it's something that can be very strong, and it's a cheap card to include. I think 3 copies is pretty good. Okay, and then the final card they included in the starter deck is going to be a location, Tropical Rainforest. It is a 3 cost, 1 to move. It gets you 1 lore per turn, and the ability is Snack Time. Opposing damage characters gain Reckless. Now, with the starter deck how it is, this card was pretty underused in my games just because it was so hard to get damage onto opposing characters. But I think once we tweak the deck list and we constantly have damage on our opposing characters, we're going to be able to use this to really keep the board in like a status quo state. Because if you're giving them Reckless and they have nothing to challenge, they have to challenge this location, so it probably will not survive more than a turn or 2. But we can use this as a way to delay questing, to keep more damage characters on the board at once, and then set up a big play of our own. So I think this is actually a pretty sneaky good card when used in the right situations. Okay, I'm gonna cut here and just edit the deck list, take out all those excess characters, really even up the numbers to make it more consistent, and then I'll tune back in once we're ready to go and we're ready to start adding in those extra cards. Okay, we have the deck list edited now. I got rid of all the excess characters. I added in more copies to make it a little bit more consistent. And right now we're sitting at 48 cards. Just to quickly go over what we have included in the deck as of right now. We do 4 copies of the 2-drop Robin Hood, 4 copies of Crunk, 4 copies of Pete, 4 copies of Simba, 4 copies of Scar, 3 copies of the Uninkable Yzma, 4 copies of Robin Hood, 6 copies of Simba, 3 copies of Kronk, and 2 copies of the Big Robin Hood. And then on for our actions, we're only actually going to be running with Hypnotic Deduction and Night Howler range. 3 copies for Hypnotic, 4 copies for Night Howler. Our only song right now is going to be When Will My Life Begin, 4 copies. And then I added an extra location to get us to 3 copies of Tropical Rainforest. Okay, so first thing that we want to add in here for sure is going to be Robin Hood. I think just adding in 4 copies of the 1-drop Robin Hood is going to be really good, as well as there is a 2-drop Robin Hood here with the ability Exert to deal 1 damage to chosen character. That gets us all the way up to 56. That gets us all the way up to 56 cards, so we might need to revisit the numbers and do a little bit more tweaking, but I think those 2 in particular are going to be really good for us. Then, since we're playing with so many Robin Hoods, we have to go ahead and grab Robin's Bow. I'll add 3 copies of that to the deck. We're going to be using to replace Hey Hey, since we got rid of him, is going to be Chi and Po. He has a 4/7, which gives him a little bit more survivability. He doesn't quest for as much, but we really want to be using him more just as a tank. So it's not the end of the world that he only quests for 1. I'll throw 4 copies of him in the deck. Like I said, we'll revisit and make sure the numbers get us to an even 60 at the end. Since we're playing a steel deck that wants to have damage on the board, we have to grab at least 3 copies of Grab Your Sword. And then let's just take a look at the other songs that we have available for us. We could go with a Let the Storm Rage On, since we do have quite a few 3-drop characters. I don't think I want to do a Whole New World, just because we have a lot of other ways to draw cards and we don't want to give our opponent all that card draw. Let's throw in 3 copies of Let the Storm Rage On, just to hold it there, and we'll see if that makes it to the end. And I think that might be it for songs. Let's go ahead and see if there's any more actions that we can include in here. I really like Avalanche. Maybe I might even include this over Grab Your Sword. Just being able to get rid of a location and only doing 1 damage to opposing characters, giving us the chance to benefit from that existing damage, might be a little bit better than Grab Your Swords, even though it doesn't completely clear most board states. And then yeah, I think that's it for that as well. All right, and now let's look at the locations that we have available for us. We already have Tropical Rainforest. We could add Sherwood Forest, since we're playing with a lot of Robin Hood cards. Although the secondary ability, giving Robin Hood's Ward, is very good, but it's very expensive to deal 2 damage to something with. But the ability to deal 2 damage to an already damaged character is not the best thing in the world. We could actually go ahead and grab some copies of 7 Dwarves Mine. During your turn, the first time you move a character here, you can deal 1 damage to a chosen character. If it's a knight, you deal 2 damage. We're not playing with any knights, so we won't be doing the 2 damage, but moving somebody there and getting a free damage onto something could be pretty good. It is a little expensive to do 2 to play, 2 to move, but that means we won't have to exert characters in order to do that damage. Let's go ahead and grab 3 just in case. If we wanted to protect our Tropical Rainforest, we could play with the wall and then just force that damage to come to the wall instead of the rainforest. That could be an interesting idea. So let's grab 2 of that as well and see where we're at with card count. Okay, that puts us at 77, which is way over where we want to be. I don't know if there's any more characters that we want to grab. We could grab like a Tinkerbell, although she is a 6 cost. So you wouldn't be able to play her for free with Kronk. Everyone knows Diablo is great for card draw. I think the only other thing that I would be really thinking about would be, since we're running a very high uninkable count, to grab Hidden Inkcaster for the additional card draw and for the inkability of your uninkable cards. There was one other card that I wanted to take a look at here, and that's going to be actually an Emerald Bell card. She says whenever she is challenged, the challenging player has to discard all the cards in their hand, which if you combo this with Reckless and she's the only thing exerted, could be a really strong play. And that's where I think this plus Night Howler range could be very, very powerful, especially if you can get this out on turn 3 because of the shift. The only problem is that Emerald and Steel don't have very cheap Bell cards. They only have a 3, so the earliest you can get it out would be turn 4. I love the idea of forcing our opponent's hand and getting a max benefit out of it. Pairing this with a Flynn Rider that gets more lore, when our opponents don't have a lot of cards in their hand, could be really strong to close out games. So let's go ahead, let's grab 3 copies, and then we'll also grab 3 copies And then we'll also grab 4 copies of the Bell from Emerald, just to see if we can work it in. Same thing with Flynn. We'll grab the 1-drop for Flynn, as well as 3 copies of the Floodborn Flynn. So now that actually puts us at 91 characters, meaning that I think we're gonna have to drop the 1-cost Robin Hood. I think just to be safe, we'll also drop the Inkable 2-cost Robin Hood, and that'll get us down to 83. We're gonna have to get rid of the Grab Your Swords, and I don't think we're gonna be able to make the wall work. So now we're at 78. So we need 18 cards left to get us where we want to be. Maybe we drop this Simba card, because we do have other ways of drawing cards in this deck. We could also drop the Bell. Maybe run a 3-2 line for the Bell instead of a 4-3. Our Shift Robin Hood, we can definitely drop down to 3 copies. We can also drop down to 3 copies of our Bodyguard. Get rid of a copy of Kronk because it is a very expensive. I'll drop 1 copy of Hypnotic Deduction just because I'm not a fan of the card, 1 copy of Avalanche, 1 copy of When Will My Life Begin, and we'll go down to 2 Seven Dwarves Mines, which now gets us to 65. Okay, next up on the cuts, we do need to balance out our inkable, uninkable count, so really going to be targeting. We'll have to go down to just a 1 of the big Robin Hood, and we'll have to go down to 2 copies of both Robin's Bow and Let the Storm Rage On, getting us down to finally 60 cards. We do have a very high uninkable spread, but the highest card in our deck is actually going to be the 6, because we really don't want to play the Kronk or the Robin Hood for full price. So it could work, but we could very easily brick our hand doing it this way. Okay, let's save it here and we'll take a look at what the deck looks like entirely. Okay, so here is the deck laid out. This is our upgraded version of the starter deck for Emerald Steel. We're going to be focusing on doing a lot of small ping damage in the early game to be able to activate some of our better abilities. And then also we're going to be forcing our opponent to attack the cards that we want them to attack by giving them Reckless and only exerting 1 card. So we can surprise them with the Bell card to wipe their hand, or we can force them to challenge into our Chien-Po. Once things have damage on them, we're going to be attacking with everything in order to get that card draw with Scar. We're going to be using Pete to prevent any actions from being played, allowing us to set up bigger plays of questing with our big Robin Hood, our Shift Robin Hood, and then our Flynn and our Bell cards. I think that wraps it up for now for upgrading the starter deck. I know we did technically remove a lot of cards that come with it, but I think the general theme is the same of getting small damage onto your opposing characters so that our cards can have more benefits. This is a very interesting theme that they chose to launch with this set, and I'm excited to put this together, sleeve it up, and see if it plays a little bit smoother than what we got with the basic starter deck. I think just by evening out some of the numbers, it's going to be a lot more enjoyable experience. I don't think this is going to be a meta type of deck per se, but I can see how fun this could be. It's a very interactive deck, allowing you and your opponent to go back and forth, and you benefiting from them keeping those characters on the board damaged. So I'm very excited to sleeve this up and see what it can do. If you're interested in more Lorcana videos like this, check out our channel. If you haven't already, subscribe, because once we reach 1,000 subscribers, I've already announced that I'm going to give away my copy of the D23 collector set. Just make sure you head over to that video and leave a comment letting me know what character of yours is your favorite from that set. Next up, we'll take a look at the other starter deck that came out with Shimmering Skies. The Ruby Amethyst deck actually was put together pretty well and is already pretty strong with what it wants to do. My wife wiped the floor with me when I was playing the Emerald Steel deck, but I'm sure we can make some improvements to really take that deck to the next level. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.